Good morning. My name is Gabriele Pesce. I'm the Director of Innovation and Sustainable Finance Europe and Power, the European Association for District Heating and Cooling. And today I will moderate this very lean and quick episode of the first episode of this webinar series called Beyond the Horizon. Why Beyond the Horizon? But the horizon I'm referring to is Horizon Europe. I think it's a very famous funding program from the European Commission. The aim of this series of webinar is to highlight the existence of other very useful, potentially useful funding program for the heating and cooling sector, and of course, in particular for the district heating and cooling. Today's episode is dedicated to the Modernization Fund. Maybe Modernization Fund is not one of the most famous of the funding program at the European level, but its potentiality are very high, in particular for Eastern European countries and their district heating cooling networks. Today we have our great speaker, Morgan Henley from CEE Bankwatch, that I will introduce very, very shortly, as she will present the potentiality and the features of this Modernization Fund. The Modernization Fund very quickly aims to, in particular, modernize, of course, energy sector, particularly in Central Eastern Europe. But of course, Morgan will explain you many other details and also a couple of best practice. And also today, we're going to highlight the challenges and maybe also the shortcomings coming from these funds that could be, of course, improved. And together I would like to discuss with you all how we can improve this fund. And if some of you in the audience had some experience in submitting a project in the context of this fund, please speak up, because of course the idea is to share ideas, to share experience in using this kind of fund. Of course, the webinar will last around 1 hour, even less. After Morgan presentation, we're gonna open a QA session where you are really free to ask question. But of course, I also have some question to Morgan. And as I said, please don't be shy. This is not a monologue from Morgan. It's really a way to discuss all together and try to brainstorm also how to improve and which are the main, I would say, aspects of this fund that can support and accelerate the energy transition, in particular in Eastern Central Europe. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Morgan to introduce herself. So welcome, Morgan. Good morning. Please, the floor is yours, and you can also start with your presentation. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Gabriele, for inviting me to speak. It's always a pleasure to cooperate with Euroheat and Power, as I think we've had a lot of great success cooperating on district heating. So maybe to give you a bit of context of who I am, I work specifically on district heating, decarbonization at CEE Bankwatch, which if you don't understand what CEE Bankwatch is, it's not very indicative from the name. We look at public funds and try to encourage financing to go to good projects and not bad projects. And for me specifically, it's looking at district heating in Central and Eastern Europe in the EU member states. So one of those funds, and the one that we're here today to talk about, is the Modernization Fund, but also includes other funds like the Resilience and Recovery Fund, Cohesion Fund, Just Transition Fund, and also a little bit the work of the European Investment Bank, all of which connect with the Modernization Fund at some point. So we'll get to that. So I will. So yeah, just to start, I mean, I think if you're here, you probably have some idea of what the Modernization Fund is, but we'll get into the details. But indeed, it's, I think, going to be one of the biggest drivers for decarbonizing district heating in Central and Eastern Europe, because it's explicitly made for that. It's hence the name Modernization Fund. It's one of the few that really has specifically the CEE countries in mind, and also, well, go to the next slide. You can see the members that are eligible. So it's for the 13 lower income member states. And recently, welcome to the club, were Greece and Portugal. But as you can imagine, Greece and Portugal are not the countries with the most district heating, so they're not, I mean, they will and they can benefit from it, but also they haven't been included in the disbursement periods yet, so we don't really know what to expect. But what we do know is the countries that have been there before, which are the gang of the new Eastern countries, new member states, and it should go to supporting investments. And these are the 5 categories: renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy storage, energy networks, and just transition in carbon dependent regions. As all of you who are experts in district heating know, district heating falls in all 5 of those things. So as district heating often is the case, it's a bit of a catch-all for many investment schemes, but it doesn't perfectly fit into one, because usually to improve a district heating system, you need to do probably all 4 of those, apart from just transition. And unless you're in a just transition, then all 5. So the fund, which it's from 2021 to 2030, I believe it's should be 57 billion euros. So that's quite a lot of money. The money comes from the revenues of the EU ETS, so it can also go up and down. But that's what they anticipate. And this is it's increased as the EU ETS price has risen. So the fund is even getting bigger. And yeah, so the conditions for projects to be financed from the Modernization Fund, they have to follow the requirements from the ETS directive and the implementing regulation, both of which have been completed last year. So these are already set pieces of legislation with the rules already in effect. So each country has a certain little bank account in the Modernization Fund. So whenever they're applying, it has to be, still enough money in their account, because it's the countries that apply for projects or schemes. It also has to go in line with state aid rules, which is as many of you might know from your own experience with state aid and district heating, can also be a bit tricky, but we can discuss that a bit later. And so from 2025, it should comply with the do no significant harm principle, which is a new principle that's been introduced since the Fit for 55 package. And what that actually implies, we don't know, because it'll only be implemented from January 2025. But from our experience at Bankwatch, we don't see it really as much of a barrier, but rather just a paperwork exercise. And then, yeah, no double funding of the same cost with other EU or national instruments. But yeah, what we'll get to later is to see what you can co-finance it with, which I think is also maybe important to know if you're working with EU funds at all already. So then they have it set up into 2 different categories of investments: priority and non-priority. So 70% should go to the priority section and 30 for the non-priority. And as you can imagine by the names, priority, it's just a bit easier. You don't have to submit as much paperwork and do as many permits. Priority, also, they just can't finance quite as much for the non-priority projects. So yeah, it has to fall into at least one of the priority areas defined by the ETS directive, which is these 5 we looked at earlier. And so specifically for district heating, yeah, it has to improve the energy efficiency and smartening and increasing the share of renewable energy. But as you can imagine, that means many, 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 many things. So that's one thing that we find as a bit of a weakness of the fund, is that the difference between priority and non-priority isn't very straightforward. So yeah, the non-priority should be fall in line with the Modernization Fund objectives and demonstrate a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but it doesn't, basically it only excludes solid fuels, which means coal, which no country has applied for any coal projects and won't, so, or not that we know of. Maybe they applied and were rejected, but so yeah, it's the European Investment Bank that decides which is a priority and non-priority investment. And yeah, as I said before, it's not very straightforward. And I can show you some examples of later. So for co-financing, as I mentioned before, the investments have to be in line with Repower EU and the Fit for 55 package. So here are like the four biggest, I guess, potential co-financing from the EU: the Invest EU program, the Connecting European Facility, which is like the projects of common interest, the European Structural and Investment Funds, so cohesion, and the ERDF, and then the Just Transition Fund. So what we see so far is it's mostly the co-financing is coming from cohesion, because I think also as district heating companies, you're probably more used to working with that one than others, or the authorities in your country directing it towards district heating. And then there's the Just Transition Fund, which since the Just Transition Fund hasn't been like it's only now its implementation phase, it will be interesting to see how well they're combined with this Modernization Fund, because there is also within the Just Transition Fund there is a pillar that's really targeting infrastructure, which would include district heating, which also, from when speaking to the commission, they say has really been under applied for. So that's maybe another webinar that me and Gabriele can brainstorm on. So yeah, as I mentioned before, the European Investment Bank was the one who decided who was non-priority and priority. But the entire investment scheme, it's decided by an investment committee. So there's 10 representatives, one per beneficiary country. I guess now there will be 12 because there's the 2 new countries joining. So sorry for that typo. And then you have 3 representatives from non-beneficiary countries. So right now it's Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden. And then you have a representative from the European Commission, from DG Klima, that's the chair, and then one representative from the European Investment Bank. And if you want to find the names of the members of the investment committee, they're all available online. And depending on what country you're in, it's probably a familiar name, because typically it would be a representative from the environmental fund of your country, but that also will change country to country, which we can get next. And here's a picture of them meeting in Krakow. They meet twice a year, and where they decide what projects will be chosen. So yes, as I mentioned before, the administrator of the funds is usually the National Environment Fund, but it will depend each country. So very happy to hear if in your country it's something different. To be honest, I don't have a comprehensive overview of which country has what. And usually they're dealing with other EU funds, Cohesion, RF, Social Climate Fund, as the implementing authority. I pulled up this picture from the Polish ministry's website, so you can get an idea of how it's administered. So straightforward, right? I think there's 20 boxes in here of people in the either implementation or decision-making bodies. So I think it will really depend on what's your relationship with these funds, country to country. And if you have very close working relationship with them or not. But what we also see is yeah, most of the funding is going to the bigger companies who probably have dedicated staff who are working explicitly on EU funds on a regular basis and probably know these different entities quite well. Yeah, and then so how you would apply so the country would maybe, so let's say the Czech Republic, they would get a scheme approved for district heating, improving energy efficiency, and then they would have an open call, the Czech National Environment Fund for companies to apply for the funding that they had already had approved from the investment committee. But otherwise, you could also have projects, which would be then for a specific let's say, yeah, district heating decarbonization project. I'll show you an example later. So they do support, yeah, both schemes, which would be multi-annual. I think I don't need to explain what a scheme is, and then specific projects. So you can do both. And between the schemes and the projects, it's not exactly clear, like from an outsider's view. I mean, on basic, yes, what a scheme and a project is, but then we also see some schemes that aren't really that diverse in who it's going to, but probably going towards one entity. So I don't think the criteria between the two is that strict. So yeah, I have two examples. One is of positive examples we've seen of funding for the Modernization Fund. One is a biogas district heating in Bydgoszcz in Poland. I mean, biogas is not the first solution we would be happy to see, but at least it's a step in the right direction. So as I said, with this scheme project difference, so 44 million euros was awarded to the Polish scheme for biogas plants to be for district heating for the whole country, and then 14 million will go to this one in Bydgoszcz. Pro Natura Intermunicipal Waste Disposal Complex. And it's in addition to a loan from the EIB to improve the district heating system in Bydgoszcz. So yeah, it's they will be producing biogas. The district heating itself, the system, it's I think being retrofitted to be able to build on gas. So you can see how that works. And it's, I think, should be in the implementation phase this year. If anyone here is from Bydgoszcz, happy to, or Poland and knows more, happy to hear more how it is in practice. And then another one is geothermal district heating in Košice in Slovakia. So in Slovakia, it's been known for decades now that there's this great geothermal potential in Košice, the second biggest city in the country. And it's been a long, long process to get it actually off the ground and running, but now the funding is there and ground has been broken to get the wells up and going. So it will be a CHP. I've heard it should be the biggest in Europe once it's operational, replacing gas and coal. So yeah, this is an individual project. It's not a part of a scheme, and should be financed from 2022 to 2025. 88 million euros, half from EU funds. So it should be covered by both the Modernization Fund and the Just Transition Fund, as Košice is in the Just Transition region of Slovakia. So it'll be, yeah, about 2,000 gigajoules annual geothermal heat supply. They're building 5 doublets, so injection, reinjection in nearby villages. And yeah, should go directly into the Košice district heating system. And this one is quite exciting because it should be one of the biggest renewable, like really not biomass or biogas projects for district heating in Central and Eastern Europe. And one of the things, this is, I think, a very good example of one of the weaknesses of the Modernization Fund, despite that this is a good project, and I think there's a lot of potential for replication in the region. It was considered a non-priority project because of the risk associated with geothermal. But it's exactly a renewable project, quite straightforward renewable. So, but since also, yeah, they changed legislation in Slovakia, so now it should also have easier processing. And now it's considered a national priority. And going forward, I don't think it shouldn't be considered a non-priority investment, but priority. But I think it was granted in last, or in 2022, the second disbursement. Mm. Yeah, I think that's it in terms of my slides. So yeah, I'm happy to chat about it a bit further. And if you have any clarification questions, I'm also happy to go back and to
Thank
anything.
you. Thank you very much, Morgan. Thank you a lot for this very exhaustive overview. So we have already a couple of questions before. We saw that Modernization Fund has a great potential, but of course has some challenges, and its say management and the way you can submit projects is not really straightforward. So can you, Morgan, in really 1 minute in a nutshell, to resume to our attendees the way or the step they have to go through to submit a project. So just to resume for everyone, Modernization Fund, differently from other EU funds, are managed basically at national level. So the Commission gives to the member state, and the selected member state we saw at the beginning of the presentation, so mostly Eastern European and Central Eastern European countries, an amount to be used thanks to the ETS fund, so the emission trading system for those who don't know it. Morgan, can you really resume the steps? So I am an organization, I am someone that is based in this country, or an organization that has assets that would like to modernize in this country. Which are the steps they should do, or where I should practically look to find the opportunities? So let's say Czechia or Poland. Let's give an example, just very simply, in a nutshell, just to resume what you just presented.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, and as you mentioned, it's really going to depend on the national level. So, in the Czech Republic, and I think in Poland as well, they have specific schemes that are run by the National Environment Fund that district heating companies can apply for. And I think so. There's like in the Czech Republic, there's multiple schemes. One will be for individuals to apply for heat pumps for their homes. Some are for SMEs to apply. Yeah, probably also for a heat pump, and then for district heating. So it would really depend. I don't know if there's operational schemes in every country. I reckon there probably is in most, and if not, it's something that should be discussed with the country, because this is exactly what the Modernization Fund is for. And one thing I didn't show, and maybe I should have, but also it's changing, is the amount that's already been spent. And what you can see is the Czechs have received like the lion's share of the financing so far in terms of district heating, then in Poland, and then I think Romania. But then a lot of the other countries have really barely like dipped their toes into the financing pool. But I think that's also because, the past years there's been the Resilience and Recovery Fund that has been, taken a lot of the sort of attention of the, because it's, yeah, as I said before, probably the same institutions that are dealing with these funds. Um,
So basically, practically, if people wants to look for the opportunities coming from the Modernisation Fund in their country, they should go more on the national, like say the website or some portal managed by the Environmental Fund of the Ministry of Environment or the Ministry of Energy, and they should find the information how to submit a project or the step in kind
yeah.
of, right? There's no any. This is I would like to highlight this because sometimes people are looking for kind of European or in the website of the Modernization Fund. and there's not so many information there because, of course, that you can find information about the functioning of the Modernization Fund in general, the way they assess projects. So, as Morgan said, there are different investment committee made of different representatives from the IB and the Commission, so on, that they assess all the projects. But of course, the submission of projects are made at national level. So the, let's say, call for proposal or the opening, the publishing of the calls are made on the national website. We cannot know if Ministry of Environment or a specific fund or specific scheme for the modernization fund. So I really suggest you, the attendees, to, if you are interested in submitting a project in the context of the modernization fund, to look at the your national ministry or the country you're looking for. Okay, so let's start officially, even though we already started discussion. Let's start the discussion with the Q&A. We have around 20 minutes, half an hour. So please don't be shy. You have the Q&A section. I already see some question coming from the attendee. Thank you. One very specific thing: if you had experience in the modernization fund, please speak up, because we are all very interested in listening to your experience, and you can share your difficulties or your success in the submission of the project. So I'm gonna ask you some questions from the audience, Morgan. So the first one I see here, Karine Bollet. So hi, Karine. Nice to hear from you. So hi, Morgan. Thank you for the presentation. Can you clarify if a project can apply on a standalone basis, or if the country needs to approve a budget for these subsidies first? I think we almost replied already, but can you?
Yeah, as I said before, you can apply as a specific project within the, I mean, you would have to apply through to your country, and then the country would then submit it to the investment committee. But then otherwise, they can create a scheme. The country would create a scheme, and then you can apply within the scheme. But why you would do one or the other, I don't know. I think it would probably depend on how they're operating the schemes country to country.
Okay, thank you. And also, Karine has a second related question. Separately, could you let us know what kind of amounts can be received? For example, can a small project of around 5-10 million euro be eligible?
I think so. I mean, from what you can see from the disbursement, you see some projects that are in that range, both as projects and even schemes, because I think also they would apply again in the next disbursement round if it's something like a scheme where they would want to have more sustained funding for longer. But it's not, yeah, I mean, some are hundreds of millions and some are, yeah, like 5 million.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. If you go to the website, you can see there are small, big projects. So there's no any basically threshold, such as the Innovation Fund, for example, where you have a specific threshold in terms of capex to be respected. But as you find, this sense is more flexible, and also in this case depends on the national context and the national, say, agency managing the scheme. Okay,
And
so
as I said, also there's like each country has like a pot of money.
yeah,
So
exactly.
if you're Polish, like they have the biggest country. So also it will you see different amounts based on that, obviously.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. Okay, so we have a third question from Per Alex. So hi, Per. So is there a percentage limit of the investment that can be funded, basically? So it's kind of similar
Yeah,
the
so the
previous.
priority projects, they can have 70% financed, and then the non-priority only 30% financed from the Modernization Fund. But as I said before, what's the difference? I mean, the only thing that was like very clear, like so in the last disbursement period, in Romania, gas pipeline was approved under non-priority. I mean, a gas pipeline, why it's getting funding from the Modernization Fund, well, that's maybe a different debate, but yeah, and this is very clearly not a renewable project. So, but any for district heating, if it's or any improvements in energy efficiency, it can usually go in priority.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. Also, I would like to precise, for example, that for a very, let's say, what is called low-income countries such as Romania and Bulgaria, they have kind of exception in terms of fossil fuel financing, in the sense that they are kind of exempt from some limitation in funding for gas. And we're going to discuss about the gas role in the Modernisation Fund very quickly, Morgan,
I mean,
later.
for Bulgaria and Romania, they had the exception that they could have coal, but that ended already. So I don't
Okay.
think that they have any others on gas. I mean,
Hmm.
but in the normal directive, gas is eligible. So
Yeah, that's true. But I know that I have some kind of
yeah, but it was specifically for coal. But
yeah.
thankfully, I would say no one applied for any coal projects.
Okay, so we have another question from Karsten Baller. To what extent does the Modernization Fund operate with grants and loans? When it is recommendable to combine it with JTF, so Just Transition Fund, grants and or loans. So basically, it's a question about co-financing, basically.
Mhm. That's a great question. I don't know and like what would be the preferred. Like I think it would depend on what the project is and how easy it is to work with the other funding sources. As I said, with JTF, there hasn't, with the Just Transition Fund, we haven't seen it in practice yet. But I mean, what the commission says is that, yeah, they should be really easy peasy, good buddy ways to combine. Um,
But in
EIB,
reality,
I would hope as well, if you have a loan from the EIB, considering they're also administering the Modernization Fund. Um, but I think it just depends on what it's like dealing with those other funds. I know EIB is not sometimes the easiest financing source.
yeah, and
But
also
it's a really good question. I think that's something we would know a bit better in like a year when we can see how it's implemented a bit better in practice.
yeah. This is a kind of feature that maybe they could be improved for the Modernization Fund, for example. And also in general for the Just Transition Fund, as you might know, no, you, Morgan, in general, the audience, you can just finance in a specific Just Transition region. So your project, for example, if you want to combine Modernization Fund with JTF, you need to be sure that your project is located in a just transition region if you want to combine with JTF, of course. So the JTF also adds geographical scope or geographical constraint to co-financing. This is not really with something that we fought before as Euriton Power to enlarge the scope, the geographical scope of the JTF, but apparently they still keep this selective just transition region. Let's see in the future if will be more flexible. Thank you.
But with I mean, I think, yeah, as I said before, just transition might be a whole nother webinar. But one thing is also, I think, especially with district heating, it's not clear what is, I mean, and what I've seen, what is considered a part of the just transition. Because if you are getting the coal from a just transition region, but you are in, I don't know, a city that's not in that region necessarily, are you still eligible? From what I've seen, it's not very clear. So it's maybe not as closed as we might.
Yeah.
I don't know.
One of the episodes probably will be dedicated in March to the JTF. So we can, Morgan, you are very welcome to attend it and to express your concern about JTF, of course. Okay, we have another question from Nicolas Cravellin. Hi, Nicolas. Okay, they had some experience apparently. So we have found difficulties to activate envelopes for non-priority projects. How could we work together on ensuring that some identified technologies can be changed to priority projects? That's a big question. So probably it's a 1 million question, with $1 million question.
Probably
Morgan,
hundred millions of dollars question.
yeah, exactly, like the priority investment. How we can work together, Morgan? That's, I think it's more an open question. It's a kind of brainstorm, also from the point of view of our association. So like you're the Power CEE Bankwatch. Maybe you can explain, Morgan, how Bankwatch is working also on that a little bit to lobby, how to ensure that Eastern European country gets the right funding. Um, So, how would you suggest what would you suggest to Nicolas in this sense? How we can try to change some kind of project for non-priority to
Yeah.
priority investment?
So I think in general, what would be helpful and if, what we could maybe do together, I think it's in all of our interest, both from NGO side and from a beneficiary side, is to just help improve the transparency of the Modernization Fund. Because this is one thing that we struggle with is seeing, we don't know what projects are being applied for. They should publish an indicative list. Um, but it's still a bit late when we see it. And different countries have different procedures for being in a monitoring committee and whatnot. So in general, I think it would be upon all of us to push the national level administrators of the fund to improve transparency and to make it easier to apply. I think especially if we see that it's really only kind of the big sharks of funding that are really able to access it, they're also maybe not going to be the biggest vanguards in terms of renewable technologies, which is kind of besides the point of the Modernization Fund. I don't know if they need the extra cash as much as maybe a smaller, more innovative project. So
It's
I
true.
think in general, if we can push for a more transparent and clear process, um, and seeing what exactly is priority and non-priority, I think they're very hesitant to subscribe to anything about CO2 emission savings or something like that. Um,
Yeah, on
but
our
also the
side.
legislation is already in effect, so there's not much that can really be like changed from that. I think it would really just have to be on the national level.
Exactly.
And I mean, the EIB also has its own criteria, but how that interacts with the Modernization Fund is also not very clear because the EIB should be not financing much gas, but
No, they have a lending policy now that was quite even published even before the EU taxonomy regulation.
yeah.
So they have a clear energy lending policy that they need to respect. But as you said, Morgan, I agree much with you. We need to operate national level because, of course, as for Euratom Power that we lobby at EU level in general, we are a little bit limited in this sense for the Modernization Fund because, of course, in particular, this is my daily job. We need to lobby to advocate for more funding for district heating and cooling. But differently from other EU level funding, the Modernisation Fund, as we said, is managed at national level. So basically, the national scheme and the national governments decide which are non-priority and priority investment. And in this sense, of course, we liaise with our national association, the district heating and cooling national association, like the Czech one, and other national association. They need to lobby and advocate for towards the respective national governments to make them understand that the heating and cooling, in particular heat networks, need to always prioritize that. Of course, it's a long process. In some countries, it's working, it's more successful. In other one, it's a little bit less successful because, of course, and this is one of my maybe a question later. Sometimes heating and cooling, in particular heat networks, compete with other sectors that need funding as well. But of course, because of the size, like the power sector, they tend to draw the few resources that the Commission is putting at national level. Okay, we have another question from an anonymous attendee. Are thermal energy storage or waste heat recovery technologies eligible for the Modernization Fund? And then, of course, he asked for, or she asked for, the presentation. Yes, the presentation will be recorded, so will be later published on our YouTube channel. And I guess I need to ask if it will be shared also by mail. But probably, but for sure, it's recorded, so you can look, you can rewatch this webinar later. I repeat the question. Thermal energy storage, waste heat recovery is eligible?
Yes, it should be. But in practice, I don't think we've seen so many projects being done yet. But as I said, like it's only been like 2 years since the money has started flowing, I guess, or being approved and then flowing, I think even later. So that's also like I didn't have so many really positive examples to show because these were the two that I found. On district heating. There's lots of nice projects from the Modernization Fund that are going towards transport or electricity. As Gabriella mentioned, it's a bit in competition. So there's lots of those, but for district heating, the most of the financing has gone to improving energy efficiency in combined heat and power. So probably will be coal to gas switches. Um, which, yeah, is a bit disappointing, I would say, to have such a large funding source that's going to something that probably could have been financed anyways. I mean, you would think with the Modernization Fund, since you have this big extra incentivizing towards renewables, it would go to more innovative projects, but we haven't really seen that yet. But also maybe it would change because more countries would apply for the Modernization Fund. And also I think a lot of the countries are trying to figure out how to fit themselves in, like how they want to distribute the funds. I know that since the Czechs have received a lot of financing from it, and other countries have been asking them how they do it, how they disperse and like that. And maybe also it's worth mentioning there's also the Social Climate Fund, which is sort of like the brother of the Modernization Fund. But from what I've heard from the commission and also talking to some of the national operators, is that they're really thinking that district heating would go under Modernization Fund because Social Climate Fund, it's for all the member states, not just these low income member states. And it's goes for many different like types of projects. So I think they're trying to push the district heating stuff to Modernization Fund. Also maybe compared to like cohesion fund as well. So I think it's something that the district heating companies will get to know a lot better in the next years.
Thank you for also, yeah, mentioning this social fund. It's quite a new and not really well known, but yeah, it's coming more and more funded. Okay, we have another question from Dimitris Papageorgiou. So good morning, Morgan and Gabriele. So thank you, Dimitris. Good morning. Are there any estimation on the funding available for the Modernization Fund per country that may go to district heating projects over the next 7 years? I'm particularly interested in estimating the size of the solar district heating market within the above time frame. Okay, it's a very difficult question to answer. We can have just speculation. Morgan, you can start replying and I can intervene later. I guess it's not easy to type there to answer to this question.
I mean,
Uh,
the each country, yeah, as I said, they have their pot of money. It's written on the Modernization Fund website, either the commissions or the EIB. They both have their own Modernization Fund landing pages. But what if that will go to district heating? I don't know. It would be really interesting, and maybe yeah, that's a really good idea to ask. Like, can you give some indicative targets of how much for each project?
yeah.
Especially, I mean, if you're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of euros, it would be useful to know that that's available or not. Um, but I don't think, but I have a feeling they're not going to want to do that. And they
Yes,
want to
true.
keep it as flexible as possible, but.
Yes, Dimitris, it's quite impossible to reply to this question because, of course, as the Modernisation Fund is managed, there's no any clear, not clear programming, sorry, but for example, for Horizon Europe or the Innovation and Research program such as LIFE, you have a work program where there's a clear budget for, and it's quite easy to, I would say, look at the clear budget for sector. You can estimate a little bit. But for the Modernization Fund, as we said, basically the ETS revenue are distributed to in each country, and each country set the scheme for the modernization fund. In this scheme, of course, the priorities are different. So, for example, in Poland, maybe this heating will be prioritized. So we're gonna have kind of amount. But in Greece, I guess I assume from your name that you are from Greece or Cyprus, I guess. So, for example, Greece just joined the modernization fund, if I'm not wrong. So it would be nice from you, I don't know for which organization you work, Dimitris, but it would be nice to advocate towards the Greek national agency managing the modernization fund to, I would say, advocate for more fund for the DC heating and cooling. For example, the Greece has a great potential also for cooling in particular, but we know that there are some nice example in Greece of DC heating and cooling, even though it's not the biggest market in Europe. But that's a great opportunity for Greece to have the Modernisation Fund funding the heat network. So unfortunately, it's not. Oh yes, Dimitri, you are replying. I understand that the question is challenging, but on the other hand, SMEs like us have limited resources to serve each country to estimate the prospect of solar DC heating that the Modernisation Fund offers. Of course, totally, I totally agree with you. As on our side, as Euriton Power, we publish and we every year we sell the market outlook. We will give an estimation in general of the market trend and investment needed for specific sector in this heating and cooling. So also the solar DC heating, but specifically for the modernization fund is not. For us it's impossible because it's really we should ask each national government which are the main I would say prospect. One thing that's come to my mind is that the modernization fund should respect to be in line with the national energy and climate plan. So one int can come from the analysis of the national energy and climate plan of a specific country, where they prospect the roadmap to the transition. So if a country is prioritizing this heating and cooling, and the national energy climate plan is mentioning this heating and cooling, in particular solar, this heating and cooling in the specific plan, probably there are big chance that also the modernization fund would align with this priority, because the Commission recently in November just add a rule for country to align the modernization fund with the NECP, so the National Energy Climate Plan. So this is the only way, in some way, to understand which is the trend.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add something, Morgan, in
I
this
mean, yeah, I'm
sense.
glad you brought up the NECPs. It's yeah, when we had a meeting with the investment committee, the commission was very strong about saying, please link your modernization fund to the NECPs, even though there was some pushback from some of the member states to do so. I think anyone is afraid to write anything on paper and be held accountable for it. But indeed, I think it's a fair enough point, and I think this is something we can work on together as you know, asking for these kinds of targets. At least it doesn't have to be indicative targets, but even just oriental, like for orientation purposes of what we can expect, and also how to encourage something like solar thermal to be included more, because I don't think there's many schemes specifically for solar thermal, if any, in operation yet. So
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. So I have some questions also for you. If we don't get other question from the audience, of course, please keep on asking question. Um, so how would you? So we said Modernisation Fund has a lot of potential in accelerating this heating and cooling transition, but there are a lot of shortcomings with what we said. So how would you? Which part, or how would you improve the Modernisation Fund? Which are the main flow for you in your how would you improve, how would you describe the perfect monetization fund, Morgan? Which are the main aspect that you would improve of this fund, in your
I
opinion?
mean, when I'm daydreaming about the modernization fund
Yeah,
while
of course, I
sitting
know
in
that you
the
daydream
metro
all
or
day. That's your sometimes also in the night you
yeah, laying in bed, So, I mean, ideally, I think we need to see a sharp reduction of projects going towards gas, the coal to gas conversion, and instead really funding more innovative things because also, as we can see in Central and Eastern Europe specifically, um, there's just kind of a lack of yeah, what's the market? People don't know because it's so little at the moment. And so then there's some hesitancy, I think, for some from companies to really, get their feet wet in these countries. And if something like the Modernization Fund would give them a bit of insurance that, projects will be coming, I think it could really spur a change. Um, and yeah, I can understand if you want to focus on Germany because yeah, huge market, plenty of money, um, things like that. Um, Ideally, yeah, the state aid would also be able to help encourage it for the more positive elements of district heating and not, just the kind of business as usual. Ideally, it would be more transparent, and I hope someday, maybe, we could also have that there could be projects that apply directly and they don't have to go through the member state level. So right now that's not possible. But I think, also it shouldn't get caught up in whatever national sort of politically oriented division of money. It should be able to be a fair playing field for all companies or district heating associations or what have you. Um,
Mhm.
and also, yeah, encouraging smaller companies that are also maybe not big part of big utility companies to have it also access for it. Like, yeah, I don't know. Modernization Fund, one-stop shop. I know
That,
this
that that
word
would
is
be
used
very, very
quite a
useful.
lot, but even info desk, I don't know, something to make it a little more straightforward.
It's true. It's true. It's quite complicated to navigate through the Modernisation Fund. And of course, this first episode was dedicated to the Modernisation Fund because of its potentiality, but also its difficulties. I understand that many people, but also as like more expert in funding it, for us, Modernisation Fund is always kind of in a gray zone. It's not really transparent. It's quite difficult to navigate. So I understand also your difficulties as attendee today. So as we said, Modernization Fund Morgan can also finance some still gaseous fossil fuel based assets. Do you think that could lead to some, say, stranded assets and slowing down the transition in Eastern Europe? Uh,
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly our fear is you would have, these big investments into CHPs that are then, not eligible to be, continued finance in the near future. Also, it's a bit odd to me that you would have something coming from like ETS revenues that then has to pay into the ETS system. Um,
yeah, it's quite
so
paradoxical, you say, of course.
yeah,
It's, I
exactly.
understand, of course.
So I think,
Uh,
yeah, there's it should be really incentivized to go for different types of projects.
exactly. And that's come exactly to my following question. So more in general, in your opinion, from your experience dealing with the Central Eastern European countries, which are the main priorities in terms of investment for heating and cooling sector in this zone of Europe? The biggest challenge, of course, transition, we know. But in general, because of course there are some social aspects and some more practical aspect, the problem of resources that don't exist. So which are, from your experience, from your analysis, which are the biggest challenge to accelerate the transition there?
Well, I think it's all that it has to go hand in hand with improving the energy efficiency, improving the grids, digitalizing these things. So it's like, coordinating a team of different players that all have to, get to the same goal. Because it's not just about changing the fuel source, it's also about renovating the homes and the pipes, etc. So to be able to do that all in once and in harmony and in a way that's not meaning your entire city is torn up all the time. We also have to think about that because no one wants their city to be torn up and can't get to work because, yeah, they're, digging a big hole in your road. How to do that in a way that's, people also understand it's for the good. one of the biggest problems we also have in the East is a negative reputation of district heating because of, you know, old legacy, and maybe sometimes it being inefficient or too hot, too cold, never exactly right. So showing that it's actually something for the good and it can be something that's climate positive, um, is something that we definitely need, and it would be helpful if, um, you know, we
And do
could
you
work
think,
together.
yeah, of course, and do you think there are enough resources now available for these countries to deal with these kind of challenges, or Commission, you EU should put more money, even more money is not enough, or we need a more efficient use of this resource, which are your.
Exactly. I think most any practitioners in the field will say there's enough money. It's just about how to get it and that it's spent the right way. I mean, as you can see with the Modernization Fund spending, it's really not anywhere where they had predicted it would be already. So the money's there. It's just about how to get it in the right hands.
Okay. Oh, we have, I guess, okay, we have a question from Aaron Wieland. How long does it take to get funding granted ahead? That's a nice, very
Hmm.
difficult question. Uh,
I feel
Morgan,
like it's such a cop out that I keep saying it, but I think it's really going to depend on the national level, like how long it would take for the the operators in each country to.
yeah. Usually there are two, not two decision on the investment committee at a year. So basically, I think, let's say, if every 6 months the investing committee gather, probably you need to expect kind of 1 year of time frame average. Of course, as Morgan said, is more at national level, the responsibility. But let's say 1 year, 1 year it's something, because of course from the submission, then the invest committee need to assess, they gather, they do let's say the due diligence, diligence, sorry,
Due diligence.
and the approval of the investment. So once they approve, of course, then the responsibility go to the national funding agency. So let's say Polish, Czech, and so on. And of course, the negotiations start with the project developer. So it's quite a long process. It's not like Horizon Europe where we have 6, 8 months of everything grant negotiation. In this case, probably it's 1 year, 1 year and a half,
I
unfortunately.
mean, what I've heard anecdotally though is that that it's a longer process to negotiate getting the financing from the Modernization Fund, but once you have it, it's less strings attached versus like
Mhm.
the cohesion fund. I don't know specifically about Horizon, but yeah, that
Yeah.
like with cohesion, there's a lot of back and forth reporting. With Modernization Fund, you don't have to.
Yeah. And also the amount granted could be much higher than usually Research Innovation Fund. And it's €1 million, of course. That's I think the positive side of the Modernisation Fund. Of course, I don't want to give the idea that Modernisation Fund is useless or impossible. There are projects that got funded, even though there are not so many in this heating and cooling. Of course, they are all eligible. So there are money, and there are countries where this heating and cooling is a priority. So I really suggest you to dig and investigate more at your national, in your relevant and respective national agency to see the opportunities coming from this fund. It's already 11, so probably I would close now this webinar. Uh, Thank you a lot, Morgan. If there are no other questions, no, I don't see any. Thank you very much, Morgan. Of course, if you still have questions, you can write me, or you can write directly Morgan for any clarification. Thank you. Next week, same day, Wednesday, we're gonna speak about Innovation Fund, another very important fund where the Commission is putting a lot of money, is really asking organization to submit project there. We're gonna have Amy Radlberger from Energie sharing her experience in getting funded and presenting a project on Innovation Fund. Will be a very practical webinar episode. Anyway, thank you a lot, Morgan. It was really insightful, very useful. I wish to see you as attendee in the next episode, or of course, see you around in Brussels or in many occasions where we meet usually. And good luck for your campaign that we are sharing and we are agreeing on together. Thank you,
Thanks
Morgan.
so much. And also for any of the participants, if you have any questions, I'm happy to stay in touch. And also if you, are interested to cooperate in any of these things I mentioned about improving transparency or how to, get indicative for other renewable heating technologies, get in touch. I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
collaborate, especially with industry partners.
Thank you a lot, Morgan. See you on Wednesday, same time, 14th of February, Innovation Fund. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye.
Morgan. Thank you again.